All right. According to the clock, we are live. We are being interrupted by our ISP, and we are very mad. Very, very mad. We are gatekeepers.
And this gatekeeper is being interrupted by the greatest gatekeeper of all, his cat. So this gatekeeper will be right back after feeding said cat.
Yeah. Must obey the cat.
Yes, well, we are live on YouTube. Hello out there in comment
YouTube
land.
world. Happy New Year-ish.
Almost. Hey, we have a few other folks from our illustrious group of gatekeepers. We're going to talk about settings tonight. Give some broad overviews, maybe a few details, their uses, and perhaps how you can maybe rip stuff out of them and use them for your own little thing. You know, according to my little icon here, there are only 2 people viewing this thing. 2. And there's a lot of people there in the chat, so I don't know what's up with that.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Maybe it's
YouTube, man.
Maybe it's a network issue and it's taking a long time to update. It's up to 3 now.
Oh.
All right. GM Dave had to take a break, and we will commence as soon as he gets back. You know, there was something I wanted to talk about. Oh, it's up to 5. There he is.
I'm back.
All right. Good thing you came back, because there was a preliminary thing I was thinking about mentioning, but my brain wasn't letting me remember. If I think about it, I might break in with it while we're talking. Anyway.
All right.
So I'm going to start out with, we're talking about setting, and I'm going to talk a little bit about BECMI's, what they call the known world, or Mystara, which they have in their rule cyclopedia, an overview with some maps, and also they have a gazetteer series. I'm not sure precisely how many. I think 13 maybe, or 14, something like that. Quite a few. I have one of them. Where did I put it? I have Gaz 3, the Principalities of Glantry, because I like magic, and the Principalities of Glantry is run by wizards, and they're not that nice. So in Mystara, it's kind of a hodgepodge of various cultures from, you could have taken the Roman Empire and bits of Europe, and Tolkien's Middle Earth to a degree, and you kind of mush them together, and you have Mystara. Underneath the crust of Mystara, there is also the Hollow World, but I don't know how much they communicate, so they're 2 separate things in the book here. In the Rule Cyclopedia, Mystara is basically given an overview with a few paragraphs for each of these power centers.
Mm-hmm.
And then maps for a very large amount of the known world of Mystara. They're the old hex maps. Let me see if I can get that on there really well. I don't have a...
Yeah, I can see it. Maybe full size, like if you maybe full size your thing, audience will probably see it a little bit better that way.
audience. So I don't have an overhead camera, so that's what you're stuck with. Right. So let me get this back to here. The descriptions are pretty short, but give you enough information, in my opinion, to actually use them very well. There is a bit of an overview of the whole thing, a tiny bit of history, and then it goes into each one. So you've got the Grand Duchy of Karameikos, if that's how you pronounce it, or Karameikos. Not sure which one. Could be either. It's a forested with a forested country with a lot of contention. You could say it's kind of like perhaps Robin Hood's neck of the woods from his stories, because it's according to Robin Hood, there's trees everywhere. He had to deal with the sheriff of Nottingham, and I can't remember the name of the wood that they talked about. The forest.
Sherwood Forest.
The Sherwood Forest.
Robin Hood and Little John bopping through Sherwood Forest.
So, there are the Grand Duchy of Karameikos, Stefan Karameikos, which is what it was named after. Stefan went in and conquered the previous kingdom, made them kind of swear fealty to him, and he ran things. And he runs things. And he has some of his cronies in there as well who are not nice people. And you have some underground freedom fighters. So you can kind of get the Robin Hood vibe there. You also have a desert region where it's a lot like the Arabs. You have two magical kingdoms, one on the mainland and one on a set of islands off the coast, which they don't actually have on the map here. There's an elf kingdom, a dwarf kingdom, a halfling kingdom, the 5 shires, with stuff that you expect. They kind of lean into the elf dwarf hatred. But here, the dwarves kingdom is called Rockholm, and they don't like elves. And the Alfheim is the elven kingdom, and they don't much like the Rockholm dwarves. And there's some other dwarves that they're okay with, but Rockholm dwarves are apparently a bit snooty with the elves. And you have, with the Principalities of Glantry, it's a kind of a waterway. The main city, the city of Glantry, is a waterway city. So it's fashioned after that, and it kind of has a lot of folks in there named after that sound Italian. I think one thing I like about it, as far as the overview that's in the rule cyclopedia, is it just gives you an overview. You get the overview and the maps, and any DM who wants to add their own stuff can easily do so. The Gazetteers are more in detail. Apparently, Glantry, they hunt and kill clerics for some reason. They don't like clerics. Who wants to be healed, I guess. And Glantry trained wizards are hunted themselves outside of Glantry by clerics and fighters who are looking to make a name for themselves. So it sets up some conflicts that you can have fun with. And in Glantry, they experiment on dwarves because why not? So.
Well, they're hardy, them dwarves. They can take it.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's why, because, they've got this magic resistance. So we got to figure it out by experimenting on them in our laboratories.
In our evil laboratory.
I can't see that as being too good.
No, not when you're doing humanoid experimentation. I imagine that some people are going to find that questionable, especially these days.
Yeah. I mean, it's good for having a villain in your campaign. I definitely wouldn't consider it good, even with there's only 3 alignments in the Rule Cyclopedia BECMI version of D&D: lawful, neutral, and chaotic. I can't imagine experimenting on sentience being would be considered lawful. Probably not. Neutral at best. But I like it for its overview and simplicity, and has a lot of familiar elements that you can grasp onto if you are comfortable with especially Tolkien's worlds and our history. The history of our world. You can easily grasp on all this stuff.
And what's funny, because I've never read Mystara before, but some of the details that you were mentioning was just kind of a funny bit of happenstance lined up with the setting that I've made for myself, the homebrew setting that I've run for years, lined up pretty closely to some of the things from Mystara. Just
right.
Pure chance.
Well, I think it's probably because it's not unfamiliar lore anyway.
Yeah.
Collective unconscious.
Well, it's I don't know if you'd call it derivative, but probably is. I mean, it has dwarves and elves in the same kind of conflict that it had in Tolkien. We've all read Tolkien, or at least seen the movies.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it's going to be very similar to that. And since that's in kind of the zeitgeist of our hobby, it's hard not to, when you're making your own setting, have some of that percolate in.
Yeah.
I have to, if I'm writing any kind of lore for a fictitious game product that hopefully might release but probably never will, I always try to purposefully veer away from Tolkien, or it'll sound too similar to it to me.
Yeah. Well, I guess I would ask you guys then, what would you say are the elements that you need for a pre-made setting to be considered like a really good setting, something that you would feel is worthwhile to actually use?
I think that's real subjective. But for me...
Yeah, it's subjective.
Yeah. I think it would have to have a mixture of the familiar and the unfamiliar. The unfamiliar to make it more interesting, and the familiar stuff so that it's not totally alien. Although sometimes that can be fun too. Like a good gonzo setting is going to be fairly far removed from the norm.
Yeah.
But they can still be fun.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it could be something as simple as the art might be the first thing that grabs me. And, that's the thing that makes me go, oh, I want to know more about this world. Or just the story, the blurb, the blurb on the back of the book that gives you the elevator pitch of the story. And if
that little spark that excites the hamster enough to start running in his wheel in your brain.
Yeah. What's the elevator pitch? And if that elevator pitch can capture your attention, then that's the step that you're gonna, your entrance to take the first step into exploring this world. And maybe you ask other people about it, or you look, now you can look it up, or just word of mouth. And then if it clicks with whatever's going on in the back of your brain, then it's like, yeah, I want to run this world. I want to buy this world. I want to spend thousands of dollars on this world and everything that was made for it.
I was going to read the blurb on the back of the Principalities of Glantry Gazetteer, but it's very long. It's not really a blurb.
It's more its whole entire passage.
Right. So I think I think another part of the Mystara known world that's nice is there's the nostalgia factor that it has for being part that identifies with D&D in general, because when you think D&D, you think kind of generic fantasy, medieval, and according to the rule encyclopedia, there it's about the 1500s tech level without gunpowder or the printing press, and so that makes it easy to figure things out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of, because that's, for myself, one thing that I've always kind of wondered about is what time frame in history, relatively speaking, obviously because we're talking fantasy, but what time frame in history D&D is really supposed to be based on, because obviously I started in 3rd edition when I started playing, and I think even with the original books in the DM's guide, if I remember right, I could probably go dig it out, but I'm too lazy to do that right now. But I'm pretty sure they had rules for gunpowder weapons in the 3.0 DM's guide.
Yeah, I mean, there's been sci-fi fantasy since day one. Greyhawk is Earth.
Of course.
Greyhawk is Earth. I mean, the planet is even called URTH.
Right.
So
yeah.
If we go to the very first, the Forgotten Realms is always supposed to, Ed always says the Forgotten Realms has always been the 3rd continent of Earth that just sort of slipped further away when Pangea broke up than the other two, which is why there's so many things in the Forgotten Realms that feel like Earth. I would say, if there's a generic tech level for D&D, not counting crashed spaceships and laser beams, probably Dark Ages before the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, definitely.
And just
what I got, obviously, from starting in 3rd edition, what I got was like end of the medieval period going into the Renaissance, essentially.
Yeah. No printing press.
Right. And I think guns, while I've had varying opinions on whether or not gunpowder is appropriate for a D&D game, I think I probably would just leave them out. I would much rather have a stand-in that is maybe a hand crossbow that has some sort of magical repeating function or something like that.
Yeah. Guns and guns, are they the same thing?
What was that?
Or the actual repeating crossbow from 3rd.
Yeah.
Just a regular ass repeating crossbow with a clip of 5 bolts.
Right. I'm not sure if repeating crossbows existed in the real world, but I'm sure a dwarf or a gnome, they could probably figure that out.
It's funny because really that item for 3rd was really more of a misnomer. It wasn't really a repeating crossbow. It was a semi-automatic crossbow.
Correct.
You could just keep firing it each round until you had to replace the clip.
Right.
It's a handgun crossbow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it sounds a little silly, but I always thought it'd be neat to have a halfling, because they're good at ranged weapons. That had a pair of hand crossbows, kind of in holsters on his sides, and he'd like walk up to people and say, "Draw."
Well, we've got Bruce is queued up to join now.
Yes.
Hello.
Howdy, Bruce.
Hey, Bruce.
How is Biggest Geekus, the man behind the screen, and the OGGM doing?
Can't complain.
Can you guys hear me?
Well.
Okay?
Yes.
Excellent. The known world that you're talking about was the first setting I ever ran for D&D, because that Rule Cyclopedia came out in 89 or 90, and then after that, they put out a little, like a 32-page book pamphlet called Thunder Rift.
I remember that.
Had like three little towns in it, a bunch of NPCs. You had good notes for NPCs in there, and then you could just start running your game the way you wanted to. And then they started putting out adventures and box sets. The box sets were kind of cool because you had little standee miniatures, and the adventures were well done. And they even had like some light puzzles or riddle work in them. And so you had these really nicely produced, slick looking pieces that were coming out for about 3 years, maybe 4 years, that Thunder Rift was where the players were pretty much based at. And you could leave the valley if you wanted to. It would be hard because it was hard to scale the mountains, but you could do it. And so you had, Warduke was in Mistra, he was in Greyhawk.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah, say again?
Okay. I always get confused.
But you had Thunder Rift, which was a really neat little campaign setting, and for a 16-year-old kid like myself, it was a great place to run your friends through. I'm just saying that. And then the Rule Cyclopedia had that map set that Joe has, and it had that on about 10 or 12 pages. So you got to see the known world and about the same detail on a 8.5 by 11 page. It was pretty good.
Yeah, it's just enough detail to use, but not so much that you feel kind of beholden to any particular thing.
No, you're not constrained. You weren't told about like the 30 fucking invincible NPCs that are never supposed to die. You're not given some BS like in I hate saying this, Forgotten Realms, where you can't kill the girl with Spellfire, you can't kill Elminster, you can't go after the leader of the Red Wizards of Thay, you can't go kill off the whole of Zentarium. You have to keep these places on the map for adventures. And as much as Greenwood said, yeah, this is now your world. No, it really wasn't.
I killed Zastam.
Yeah, Zastam was supposed to be killed, though.
Yeah.
But you weren't supposed to do anything like that would shake up the world because, you're going to mess up the canon in your game versus the official canon. And the known world didn't have that. It didn't have unkillable NPCs. Right.
They always, even in the this is a pretty thick volume, and maybe not by today's standards, but it's a pretty big chunk of information. But I think it still leaves enough unknown, and there might have been some Mystara books, like novels, but I don't think there were that many.
There was like 3.
There was a Mystara video game, if I remember correctly.
Tower of Doom, and they're both made by Capcom on the Final Fight engine. But there was 2 Capcom D&D games that were wonderfully multiplayer.
I think it's called Champions of Mystara.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah,
that sounds right. Yeah, so there's I think they do the setting better than perhaps more. I don't even know if more modern settings. I don't know too many of them for how like the 5th edition folks have handled the settings. I think that they don't.
I really wish for this specific topic we would have been able to get Krim in here, because he was the one of us here that actually read Strixhaven and broke down why that setting book was so bad. But I'll try to basically summarize what he said, because from what I gathered with that one specifically, and there have been a couple others where this has been a problem, but really specifically with that one, which I think you said, OG, that you hypothesized that they might have chosen to mess around and try to do something weird and different with this one, specifically because Strixhaven is not a D&D setting; it's a Magic the Gathering setting.
Yeah, it's a Magic the Gathering setting, and it's technically a one-off adventure. It's supposed to be a module, like Keep on the Borderlands or whatever.
But they build
unlike Ravenica, which is an actual setting.
Yeah, but they build Strixhaven like it was supposed to be an actual setting where you could do wizard schools and all that kind of stuff, and they build it as what it wasn't, which I think is a big part of why people did not end up liking it. But then also the fact that what they put in there was just not very good.
I mean, I hate to defend Strixhaven, but like I said, I think it's an experiment.
Yeah.
Here's the perfect place to try all these experimental rules that we think people want. And if it sells great, we're right. And if it sells horribly, oops, we were wrong.
Well, they've been doing stuff like that. Not just Wizards of the Coast, but I'm pretty sure you could accuse TSR of doing things like that all the way back in the day, where they would just, put out a bunch of stuff and see what stuck, kind of like the complete books.
Yeah.
Most of that stuff wasn't play tested or anything. It's just, let's write up a bunch of stuff and see what people like.
Yeah.
Well, don't forget, Joe, do you remember Dragon Strike? Like,
I don't remember that.
It was a videotape that you got in a box with some fold-out maps, like a Bad Hero.
Oh,
yeah, I remember that.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, the acting in this was horrible. They took like some dudes from the local gymnasium and oiled them up and threw them in some barbarian furs and a cape, and I gave them a clay sword or something, and it was bad.
What was it called again?
Dragon Strike. I love Cinemassacre, the angry video game nerd. He used to have another character that he had called Board James, and he made a video on Dragon Strike that was goddamn hysterical.
Yeah, it was worth watching, and I'm not a big fan of Angry AVGN, but there's some things he does where he does really well, and that was one of his best. I've got to say that Dragon Strike was one of those experiments you're talking about. They also had a bunch of stuff in the early 90s. Like they put out Red Steel, a part of Mystara.
Red Steel. Yep, I remember that.
I remember Red Steel.
And they enclosed CD-ROMs or CDs in it, so you could have music while you play your game. That later would be copyright stricken if you ever played it on YouTube. they do that, and they gave you all these experimental things because they were trying to mass media and get you more involved with your game, and it was neat. But the people that were doing this hadn't really tried it themselves. They even put out a demo CD in one of the Dragon magazines that you got to listen to as the devs talked about it. I'm like, oh wow, this is kind of cool. Oh yeah, but they never use it their own table.
Right. I remember Red Steel. I also remember there was some Planescape material out there where they had a CD in it as well.
Yes.
It had game. It didn't just have music. It had game information in it, because there's a device that you find.
Oh yeah. And Poultice had a CD in the first print.
What was that?
Poultice had a CD.
Really? Oh yeah, that's right. I don't have it, but I remember hearing about that.
You got 2 full campaign journals. You had all the adventure modules they released up to that point. So you got Night of Disillusion, Bane Warrens, Chaos Attack, everything on PDF. And they had so much room to spare on there, but they tried to stuff it to the gills, and they put about 75 megs of PDFs on there. It was really good for the time.
Yeah.
But it was good.
CDs.
Yeah, in the Planescape module, you encounter this device that is a store of information, and at various points during the module, you can get it to tell you what that information is, and that's part of what was on the CD.
You know what that reminds me of? Do you remember playing the Gold Box SSI games, and you'd do something, and the game would tell you, look up journal entry 36?
Yes. Oh God, yes.
Okay. That's what that reminds me of, Joe.
Oh, okay. I have played a couple of the SSI games, but I don't remember that particular feature.
You got one book that was the rule book and had all the options and stuff in there. The other book was the lore book that had different journal entries, and at certain points in the game, you'd have to read journal entries in order to figure it out. But they had a bunch of fake journal entries in there too to screw you up. So you had to play the game and play it honestly.
Oh, that's interesting. I played Eye of the Beholder. I'm not sure. I don't remember that being part of the game, but
that was
it could have been, and I may have just
in Eye of the Beholder. I'm talking about Secret of the Silver Blades, Pool of Radiance, Curse of Azure Bonds. There was a couple of Dragonlance games I remember they put out, but the SSI Gold Box D&D games. Eye of the Beholder was not a Gold Box game.
Oh, I thought it was.
I don't think it was. I thought it was silver.
Okay, it could be.
My bad.
I don't know. I can't stake my reputation as it is on that. So I think pros for the gazetteers, and definitely the entry in the appendix in the rule cyclopedia is light on details, but lots of flavor, even if some of the flavor is familiar. I mean, I'm going to eat a hamburger, even though it tastes the same as the last hamburger I ate. It's good. Steak, chicken. Same thing with the gazetteer. It has a lot of familiar flavors, some new things, but enough room to make it your own. No, then there's not this body of novelizations that people will whine and cry about if you kill off by the emperor. Well, it's not the emperor, the grand or the high prince. The principalities, of course, are ruled by princes, and there's one main prince. If you could manage to kill him, you're pretty good, because he's. When I saw his stats, I was like, these aren't D&D stats. These are they're really high. And then, of course, he's not a person; he's a monster of some sort. So yes, there's enough stuff in there to grab a hold of, with room to make it your own. But I think the only con would be there might be too much familiar. It might be too, for some people's tastes, it might be too Tolkien. It might overlap with Tolkien's lore a little bit too much. But that's going to be dependent on the individual.
Yeah.
So, who wants to go next?
I'll go for it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to break away from D&D to discuss.
How dare you?
How dare you admit that there are other settings besides D&D?
Gary didn't like that.
I'm gonna earn the ire of a certain very faithful adherent who doesn't adhere very well to of his own faith. Talk Deadlands on one hand, Necessary Evil on the other.
Both games I love.
Yeah, specifically because I love both of these games too, but I think one handles its setting much better than the other.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to say it's Deadlands, there's a good reason for it. I would say. Yeah. But go ahead.
And I am going to say it's Deadlands. The good reason for it that I think you were trying to hit at is partly due to the fact that Deadlands was its own fucking game before it became a Savage World setting, to be fair. But
it was an amazing game at that.
I would love to find an original copy of it and play it sometime.
You could rob my friend Randy's house. He does. I believe he still has his original book somewhere.
Oh.
We'll talk after the show. But so for myself, and the reason I kind of asked you guys like what your ideas of what makes for a good pre-published setting, like the kind of things you look for ours. There's a couple things that I really like to look for, and that is one thing that you guys touched on, that it's got to have some information there to like spark the imagination, but not be so much that you can't do your own thing in it. I want the possibility of being able to be like, hey, there's obviously a main story here. I can follow it if I want to, or I can just use this setting as my sandbox and build my thing within this framework.
That's the perfect setting.
That's what I think too. And the other thing then that I think beyond that is, if the setting is doing a main story, can they expand past what that original main story is? And that's one thing I like about Deadlands, is they managed to do that. Deadlands is supposed to be an alternate history, pre-1900s Wild West with horror and weird comedy elements.
Yeah,
it reminds me very much of Wild West Fallout almost in a lot of ways. But
I mean, Wild
but better written.
Briscoe County Jr.
Yes, actually, and that's part of the reason I love Briscoe. So I found this game, and then I found Briscoe, and it made me want to play this even more.
I've only seen a couple episodes of Briscoe, though. I should try to find more.
I got the box set and got it signed by Bruce Campbell and everything.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Wow.
How was he in person?
He is one of the most charming people I've ever met. He's got wit like you wouldn't believe, and yet is one of the most humble people, like humble celebrities I've ever chanced to meet.
He deserves every dollar he's ever made.
Yeah. He is for as wacky and zany as his characters tend to be, he is surprisingly down to earth. And you are just getting in the way again.
Excuse me, human.
I met Bruce Campbell in Campaign Urbana in like 95, 96. And he was a nice enough guy to where he was doing those tricks where he grabs himself by the scruff of the neck and he flips himself over.
Flips.
Yeah, he does that. And he was doing this in 96. And he did that for us like 6 times. Okay.
Flips himself?
So in Evil Dead 2, the scenes where he's like transforming and flipping all over the place, he's doing that to himself. Like that wasn't Sam Raimi or anything setting up a rig to him or anything. He's just really good at doing that.
He can fling himself to the ground with a magical aplomb.
It's pretty impressive.
He's good.
But anyway, so to get back on track, one of the things I was saying that I like about Deadlands, especially as a setting, because it's one of the things I look for in a setting, is can you expand beyond the setting's regular bounds? You know, the regular bounds of Deadlands is pre-1900s, alternate history, Wild West. Well, they've got setting books for the 1920s, and they've got setting books for the post-apocalypse future, all based on the storyline and the campaign that the people who made the game and then converted it to Savage Worlds did. And they figured, hey, you know, we'll turn these into setting books too, which are good setting books in their own right, and leave the option to go past that.
I wonder if you could segue or could attach rippers in there somewhere.
I'm sure it'd probably be possible.
Yeah.
Because I mean, and that's the thing is like, probably because it's had the history of being its own game first, Deadlands, I think, is one of the most versatile settings I've ever come across, you know, because of the fact that, yeah, you can play the setting as is, where it's just humans, no fantastical creatures that you're playing as, but you're dealing with monsters and specters and ghosts and mad scientists and
you could easily make it
giant sandworms and all kinds of craziness.
Supernatural back in the day.
Yeah,
you could totally do that.
And I've known too, but I've known also people who decided that, you know, the whole feel of this is a supernatural version of the Wild West. It feels weird to me that the only playable race would be a human. Why don't we bring some other supernatural playable creatures in? And he added fucking halflings and something else, something that fit more with the fact of, like, you know, otherworldly spirit type creatures. I think like halflings and goblins or something as playable creatures to his version of the game. You know,
feeding off the myths of the people at the time.
Yeah, basically. You know, and just like with the Gazetteer, but really not quite just like, comes with its own map in the Marshal's Handbook that I really like the style of the map because it's very evocative. I love it when books use their inside covers. But the really nice thing about this one is, even though it doesn't have the hex grid to travel across, it does have a guide.
Scale.
Yeah, a scale and a color guide. For each of these trails, and it color guides the outlines of each of the different regions of the setting, each of the different cut up portions of what was supposed to be the U.S., gives a blurb detailing it, bigger blurbs for some regions, smaller for others, and then details like, hey, here's the rail lines that go through these areas. So these are factions you'll have to deal with if you're traveling here. It's all within, I think, a single chapter of, how many pages is that? Yeah, in one 15-page chapter, they basically no, it's not even a 15-page chapter. I think it's okay, never mind. It's the latter half of the book, but it's about 40 pages, I think. They detail all the factions in relatively short blurbs, how they're interconnected, all that kind of stuff, for if you want to use that. But it's just one section of one book. So it gives you the basic information, basic setting rules, and it's like, okay, here's your basic rules. Now, if you want it, here's all the flavor too. So
is that the previous edition or is that the most current?
This is the previous edition. This is the Explorers Edition version for Reloaded. And by comparison, Necessary Evil, Necessary Evil, still a good setting, still an interesting setting. It's
great story.
Yeah, superheroes, except no, you're not superheroes because aliens invaded and killed all the superheroes. So you're the supervillains having to step up to try and save the world from alien invaders. But my biggest gripe with Necessary Evil is it doesn't live up to its name. It's comes off more as you're anti-heroes. You're not really former villains. It doesn't really give any details on like, you know, what should you think about as like, excuse me, as a villain. You know, what sort of villainous things would you have done? Like, what kind of infamy do you have? That sort of thing.
Why were you in the jail? The jail.
Yeah, I think it gives like a short blurb or something, if I remember correctly, on like the banality of evil and all that stuff, but it doesn't really lean into its namesake, which for me was kind of disappointing, especially because I did play the most successful campaign of this that I ever played in. Was one that a friend of mine hacked together, basically saying this is going to happen 30 years before the aliens even come. So you guys probably aren't even going to see the aliens, and we're just going to have you actually play villains.
Yeah, because what if you had some villain?
Villain campaigns, yeah.
What if you had a villain that was like a Dr. Doom, and instead of huh?
That's the guy on the cover is basically supposed to be Dr. Doom. Yeah.
Right.
Dr. Doom doesn't think he's a villain. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
But instead of rescuing Earth from the aliens, maybe he subverts the aliens' hierarchy and poses as one of them and just does the villain thing from. I mean, I could see you doing that.
Yeah.
If you're an actual villain. I mean, I guess.
Did we lose Bruce to the aliens again?
One of my friends is trying to figure out where we're at, and he cannot. For some reason, he can't comment on YouTube.
Interesting.
That's weird.
YouTube be crazy.
Open it up on your phone, and you can comment on it.
Well, if he's actually trying to comment and not just participate in the chat, then it's because the thing is still live. You can't make comments on the videos until the live stream is actually over.
Well, let me figure out if that's what he's doing.
Do you have subscriber only mode on?
What's that?
Subscriber mode only, is that on? Because if he just logged in and subscribed, he's got to wait 5 minutes before he can join in the chat.
I'm sure he's already subscribed, but you never know. I don't think I have that. I don't believe I have that as a setting. You can join live.
Yeah.
Chat. Comments are for the video after the fact. Okay. Yeah, my buddy, he's doing a double shift as a guard, so he probably has some extra cycles that he can spend watching. Yeah. So, sorry for interrupting.
No problem.
Yeah. Where were we? Oh, I think, you were trying to make a point.
I was making a point about how if you're the villain, if you could convince the rest of the party to go along with you, you might. I know that the aliens are pretty tough.
Yeah.
But once you get to not legendary, you might not need to be legendary to do it, but the one down from legendary.
I think, if I remember correctly, that's heroic.
Heroic?
I can't remember exactly what it was off the top of my head.
But by then you should be able to at least make a go of it.
Yeah, probably. And that's kind of touching on, like I was saying, what my real My main gripe with this, and I think OG, you mentioned earlier in the Discord that they have obviously they've updated this since then, because my versions are from
there's a much bigger version. Plus, they have the new powers and stuff and more superpowers for it now. But the story is still the same, and it's still a great story. But I think yes, you're absolutely right. Considering how the story starts, the why am I a supervillain? Why am I there? Is very much up to the individuals and just how they're going to play it, because it doesn't really go into the, like if there could have been a list of crimes that you could have picked as part of your build, that are what like a wanted list, and then you could say, yes, these are the things. This is why I'm in jail when this happened, or this is why I was being transported when this happened.
And that's
but then the world's open enough that you could fight the rebellion and also just do generally supervillain stuff. I mean, when we played it, like every other game, we were trying to rob a bank or something, and actually remembering that we were supervillains and doing supervillain stuff.
Yeah,
because you're supposed to want to get rid of the aliens so that you could be bad guys.
Yeah, so you could just take
basically you're trying to take it's supposed to be that mixture of, we're doing this to ensure our survival, but obviously we're all supervillains. We're going to want to probably take over and, consolidate power to ourselves after the fact. But the setting book doesn't actually touch on that aspect. It doesn't touch on the evil part of necessary evil really at all.
It's just anti-heroes,
Yeah,
right.
So that's
any evil you do was up to the players.
Yeah, and it doesn't really give any guidance to the players or really even the game master for how to do that. It leaves you to do it entirely on your own, which if you're putting out a setting book, you should kind of live up to the name of your setting. You should be giving those tools, even if people aren't going to want to use them. That's supposed to be part of the draw of a setting book, at least in my opinion. You give them the tools to do what they want. Again, going back to the beginning when we were mentioning the whole Strixhaven thing, that's one of the things with Grimm that I really agreed with in his review of Strixhaven. It's supposed to be a magical college, and yet where are the rules for new ways to learn magic? Where are the rules for how a wizard school, a school of magic, works? Why is this just Animal House in D&D with wizards?
If it was Animal House, I might like it more.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, fair. It's not really Animal House. It was just the first college thing that came to mind.
Yeah,
that would actually really the thing that Grimm was describing in his video that he designed sounded a hell of a lot more like Animal House and sounded fun.
Yeah, I think there's a challenge to something like that. With Necessary Evil, they might. Okay, I'm going to interrupt myself again. So there are several settings for Savage Worlds. Many of them are as small as the book you showed us. Rippers being one of them. The initial book for Rippers is pretty much like that. And they can be a bit lax on some details. They throw down the backstory of what led to the current situation, and then you run with it. And then they might have some. I think with Rippers they had some. What did they call them? They weren't fully fleshed out adventures. They're like plot points. Is that what they call them? Plot point campaigns.
Yeah, the things on the side things. Yeah.
Right. So they had plot point campaigns and stuff like that, but not a real. I guess with Rippers, the overall thing was you're in a lodge. You're a member of a lodge that is trying to take out the monsters, and then there is some. I can't remember who it is. Who's kind of like running the monsters? Not the DM, of course, but in the setting,
the character.
There's a character that kind of is kind of the motivator for the monsters, kind of in a macro kind of way. But there's not really a onus. I mean, there's kind of in the background, kind of an onus for you to maybe perhaps look at some point in your career when maybe you're not just a neophyte to go take that guy out. But there's nothing in. I don't think, from what I remember, wasn't anything in there kind of giving you a step by step on that.
Yeah.
So I don't know about. I ran characters in a character in Necessary Evil, but I didn't own the book. So, I had Savage World, so it was easy. It's easy to do. You just make up a character, and then you use the little bits from Necessary Evil that you borrow the book and say, "Yeah, I'll do that." So I didn't read it too heavily, so I didn't pick up on what you're saying. Didn't really get so it doesn't really give you evil tools.
Yeah. So and that's by far the biggest drawback of the settings and of a lot of the other smaller Savage World settings too. I played in a couple of the other ones, but I don't remember what they were. I know it was none of the ones that are mentioned, at least in the Explorers Edition book that I have. It mentions Deadlands, Rippers.
What's the one with the fantasy with aliens? Evermore, ever something.
I got the book right here. I can just flip it to which ones it mentions, because Rippers is one of the ones it mentions. Deadlands, Space 1889.
Yeah, that's a title they bought.
Weird Wars, Weird War 2, and then Savage Worlds of Solomon Kane, which is one I definitely wanted to check out because I fucking love Solomon Kane.
Yeah.
So I don't remember. It wasn't any of those ones that I had played. There was a couple other Savage World settings I played in that were pretty lax in terms of how much they actually provided. It was more like micro settings as opposed to an actual fully realized setting that you can play in and expand yourself.
Right.
I think the best setting books are probably either the Gurps setting books or the Osprey books.
Now, I've never played Gurps, so I don't actually have any familiarity with their setting books.
Not at all.
Okay.
But what I interrupted myself when I was going to make a point about a wizard school. So part of Gauntry is a wizard school. There's a wizard school, and there are some few details on some things you can learn there as a PC. And then there are some deeper secrets you can figure out and some pretty powerful things you can discover. So if you have a wizard school in 5th edition, are they going to do something like that? Like give you new options that may supplant things that they already have produced? Give you more options to be more powerful? That doesn't seem like something they would probably do. They might have some. If they actually made it out as a setting, they might have some spells in there because it's a wizard school, but some unique spells that maybe they think are cool to release. Perhaps, and I don't know, but there might be some new wizard subclass or two that could have been something that they could have put in there. But
I think there are. I don't think there are subclasses.
Right.
There's just
the adventures. Yeah,
there's the school and like an owl race that's from Magic the Gathering.
Yeah,
but there's not a lot in Strixhaven.
Yeah, I mean, Strixhaven doesn't even follow the plot of the card set.
No, you
can't go find Urza at Strixhaven.
No, Urza's a decapitated head, but he can't go find him.
But it's very disappointing in that sense. And we touched about, I can't remember if this was actually when we were live or before we went live. We touched on this a little bit where, Strixhaven, a big part of, I think, why Strixhaven is doing so poorly right now is because Wizards build it as a setting book, but it's not. It's a bad put together campaign book. It's a bad series of adventures, pretty poorly thought out series of adventures with a tiny portion of campaign information, setting information. But they build it as if it was supposed to be, a new setting to play. And they build it like it was the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica almost, but for Strixhaven. It's not you build it wrong. That's not what you gave. That's what you promised. That's not what you gave.
Yep, we'll see.
Well, it seems like
to sell well, but
what was that?
I don't expect it to sell well, but you never know.
You never know.
I mean, even the 5e players, with one exception, are saying it's trash. So
that's interesting.
It's so far seems to be, if not, it's one of, if not the worst. It's one of, if not the least successful products that WotC has released for 5th edition.
Least or most?
I'm not surprised.
Least successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the worst selling products they've released. It might even be the worst selling one that they've released for 5th edition, but I don't know for sure. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I just know from word of mouth it's doing really bad.
Yeah, the numbers aren't out yet. It's too soon.
It's interesting that they've got 2 fairly recent missteps. It's this one and the revisions that they are doing, the mass revisions of the lore that's problematic. But I don't know. Maybe it's time for somebody to take over. You know?
Yeah, I've talked enough.
Oh, go ahead there, OG. What do you got?
Okay, well, we're talking about settings, and I was like, which setting could I talk about? Which setting could I talk about? I was like, well, I should probably talk about a setting I actually helped create. And since you guys all mentioned that you've never played it, I'm going to talk about Gurps Supers and Gurps International Super Teams, a setting I play tested and helped write for Steve Jackson Games. So carrying us and continuing the idea of superhero worlds, Gurps International Super Teams was a setting for the Gurps Supers playtest and Gurps Supers. It postulates an Earth where there are superheroes, and the superheroes many of them have been sort of unionized. So you have these international super teams, which are all organized and run under this union, and they're all very. It's interesting how prophetic it is, because since this came out years before The Boys, but it's very much like The Boys. There's super teams that are in the press, designed to be loved by fans, always the first responders to any disasters. There's like one who's always on David Letterman, and another one who's always showing up and just, everybody loves this guy. And then, of course, as you peel back the layers and you go to the other parts of the world that can afford the international super teams, you find, what they're really doing. And then the subtle layers of it really is kind of prophetic how much like the world of The Boys it is, where you start peeling back the layers of these very media frenzy, media hip superheroes run by the media, run by the government, run to be a corporation that you can shill. Think Captain Amazing from Mystery Man, where you've got.
That's what I was getting ready to say. Yeah.
And you're appearing on the TV, but then when you get to the places of the world that can't afford them, then that's where then you play into this world, and the characters are, do you decide to become a member of the international super team? Do you decide to work as rogue supers? And if you're going to be a rogue super, you have to understand that they might come after you because they want all the supers to be part of international super team. So it's a very interesting world. And we play tested it, and it got published. And yeah, so it's one of my many little bits of fame. Of course, my famous argument with Steve Jackson Games about why does the water-based character not know how to swim came out of that game. But yeah, it was it's and like since I'm talking about GURPS, and we're talking about setting books, and most of you guys said you had never seen the GURPS setting books.
No.
I would say that they're some of the best, because even if you're never going to play GURPS, the system, the setting books are usually pretty cheap, and they have all the information for the setting, both game stats, and then also historical or made up historical stats and references to other literary things that you could go read. So for like Gurps Supers and Gurps IST, for all the stuff that the rules, but then on the little blurbs on the side and stuff, they'd have references to comic books, references to movies, references to real life situations, references to real corporations and how you could play them in the game. GURPS Time Travel, there was all sorts of references to different types of time travel movies, time travel books. So they're great source books. So even if you don't ever want to run GURPS, but you want to run a time travel game or a superhero game or a fantasy game, and you don't want to spend a lot of money, you just need to get the ideas for how the setting works. You know, it's $24 probably for a GURPS setting book at the most, and everything you need to run the setting, like how Dave was saying about Necessary Evil didn't have enough super villain. Well, if that was a setting book for GURPS, then it would definitely have, at least back then, that idea of what is the motivation, how does this character affect the world, how does the world interact with the character, how does the world see these sponsored superheroes, and where does the media money go and all that stuff. So it was a very interesting world that so
it's a little reminiscent.
I don't know if it's been carried over to the current edition of GURPS. I don't think so. I think they're staying away from worlds and just doing settings like GURPS Space, GURPS Science, GURPS Sandwich. But since I'm a fan of superheroes, and it's the idea of a good setting book, that was my first one I thought I'd talk about.
It's kind of reminiscent of Xcrawl in that with media.
Uh-oh.
I think every time Joe's ISP bugs him, it's just the Matrix reloading Joe.
Yes. How did you know? I'm going to have to get you for that now. Xcrawl has a pretty huge element of media involvement with the characters, and it's more of a D&D style campaign in the modern world, kind of mishmashed with WWF wrestling. So you go into a dungeon that's been made ready for you, and then you're followed by cameras, and you have fans and sponsorships and stuff like that. So it's not like you're going and saving people. It's more of
like Running Man almost,
or a Coliseum type thing.
I like Maximum Xcrawl.
Oh yeah,
I did. Yes. I thought it was one of the better settings that they put out for 3.5 and Pathfinder. I've got it in the other room. It's worth a look. You could run it in the standard setting that it's in. You could push it up a few notches if you so desire, but I think it was, for what it was, really good.
Yeah, I don't think I have Maximum Xcrawl. I have the regular Xcrawl book, the D20 version. So, but it's good. It has that. It's a good diversion. I don't know if I'd want to do a whole campaign in it, but it's a neat idea. But it has that media element that I thought was familiar. What was your other? Did you have another one?
I've got a couple.
What was all that?
I have no idea.
Sorry, I was editing.
Were you watching yourself?
No, I was responding.
Playing with himself. Get it right.
Oh my.
No, I think it's Bruce's turn. You can, if we need to cycle back to me, that's fine. But I've said my setting.
Joe, you want to share the screen from your Discord? I put up 2 pictures in your Discord of a giant freaking map that's on my wall in the front room.
All right. Let's see here.
I already talked about Tollus on the stream here recently, Baron, and if I talk about Tollus too much, we have to start drinking. And I want to keep this to be a moderately social stream. We don't need it to be a liver killer. Yeah, click the share screen. There's going to be another window pop up in the roster. This is going to get all funky looking, and then you're going to be tabbing through to get to the desired piece. Today's setting highlight that I talk about, yeah, that is the Lost Lands tapestry map that I have from the Sword of Air campaign, Moderately Sober. And this is the world of the Lost Lands. This is a relatively new setting compared to everybody else. Everybody else's stuff they're trying to sell and they shill, and it's about 20 years old compared to other things because it came out in the 3.5 era. But this is something that you're just now getting.
I was hoping you would highlight that one.
What?
I was talking to Joe. Comment he highlighted.
But you get a bunch of different items here. Talk about the various world. They give you like little towns, the mayor, the government, like informal democracy, chartered by the Grand Duke. Population, they break it down for clan, for race of human, for high elf, hill dwarf, halfling, gnome, half orc, 9 other. They give you a lot in this book, and it's enough for you to be able to play a game and port adventures over to it if you so choose. But you have a lot of options, and this is the campaign setting where you have the Slumbering Tsar saga, you have Rapana Thuck, you have enough in this book to run a campaign as is. And this is a system neutral campaign book. Okay.
Okay.
This is system neutral. You don't have to have 5e or 3e, or you could run it with basic or Gurps. It's system neutral. Now there are some addendums that are out there floating on the web for various things. The mold, we don't have mold on my. I'm glad that they recently fixed my ceiling because I had a storm damage for like 8 months in my apartment complex. So they fixed my ceiling. I no longer have bare ceiling or bits of items that are falling down on my couch. But anyway, this is a setting that I prefer because it is a setting that you can import things, export things. You can make it very detailed for your campaign. You can run a political campaign, an intrigue campaign. There's plenty of big cities. You have a lot of detail in those hexes. Those are 50-mile hexes.
50 miles.
50 miles across.
Alrighty then.
Yeah, you have enough there to work a campaign for generations. You could do a generational game where your characters have kids and legacy campaigns, I guess is what we call it. And I completely think that this is one of the better campaign settings out there because you don't have a lore behind it until you get to the timelines. The timeline of the Lost Lands, let me get to that page here. 466. This is where the game goes from, oh, that's kind of cool, to, oh my God. Mr. Max Boyven, this is the World of the Lost Lands by Frog God Games. When you get to the timeline of how their campaign world has regressed, you have a couple different things. You have the continent for Akados, you have the continent for Libanos, and they tell you what happens along the years as it goes along. Okay? So you have that. It gives you the timeline for the Slumbering Tsar saga and other big modules that they wrote for that campaign world. So you get all of these. If you want to tie it into a grander campaign, you can. But you don't have to. If you want to ignore the timeline and just run it as your own, it's completely your game. But you have enough information here to where your players that take astute notes will be able to figure things out after about 6 or 7 sessions. and I do highly recommend this. The only negative is that Frog God games are not cheap. Focus. That says $90, basically.
Focus Press.
can't
$90?
see it, but
Yeah.
Oh, it's thick. Okay.
I mean that's a thick book.
516 pages.
Oh, now it focuses.
Yeah.
Not when you want it to.
Barcodes. Oh, yep, I can see it. Dang.
You get 90 pages. This is a deluxe book. They make this at a plant where they make collegiate books. So unlike anything written by Paizo, which will fall apart within 3 or 4 usings, this I've had for about 2.5 years, and I've used it well over 100 times.
Oh, it's in great condition.
Yeah, I try to take care of my books. That's the setting that I'm going to discuss right now, and they have a new book coming out on a Kickstarter for the gods. They have currently 361 gods that are detailed on the website and on the World Anvil website, if you are interested with that.
World Anvil. I think I've taken a peek there once or twice.
It is a interesting website. You don't need to be a genius to use it. It is a shared world community. So if you want to do something to where you have notes for little journal entries, or if you want to have like that map I showed you on my wall, they have that same map in the game, but they have little journeys between various communities and things you'll encounter. Bless you. And they discuss with you. They give you all the information from the book for each city, for each municipality, and they have a team of like 7 people that are transcribing from adventures and module and source books into World Anvil. So the World Anvil subscription is not necessary, but if you don't want to have the book, World Anvil is not a bad option. It's $10 a month.
That's not bad, especially if you don't ISPs that mess with you. If you don't already have a bunch of subscriptions, and you have subscription money to burn,
yes,
and you don't want to come up with your own setting material, and that's one of the biggest purposes for any of these volumes, is for those of us who either by temperament or by time or ability just would rather use somebody else's material either in whole or in part, and that's just fine. I know there's some naysayers out there who will like wag their fingers and say everything has to be random, and you follow the player's lead on everything, but that's just one way to do it. Having something for the characters to play around in, at least initially, for a lot of us who work a lot, and maybe after work we're tired and don't have a lot of mental energy to prepare our own stuff. It's good for that.
Let me see.
There are no outcomes in any of these things that we have presented here, I don't think.
Actually, there is.
In what?
Deadlands.
How so?
Deadlands, well, Deadlands has a campaign arc, and at a certain point it ends, and it turns into the Weird West. Does it not?
No, at a certain point it ends and it turns into Hell on Earth.
Yes.
Yeah, Hell on Earth.
Oh, I've heard of that.
The modern day one.
It's weird because the guy that wrote Deadlands and did that stuff specifically wanted that to not be an enforced canon. So it's like the first damn thing he says in the book is like, hey, we were going to make this like the actual enforced canon. Like, yeah, this is the future that happens no matter what. And then I kind of thought about it, and I was kind of like, this feels sort of shitty, because I'm basically saying that everyone who's played my game, yeah, what you did means fucking nothing. This is going to happen no matter what. So he sort of retooled it to just be like, hey, this is an optional ending. This is where something can go. The Deadlands campaign technically goes past that.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure Hell on Earth is actually in our future.
Yeah, it
Right.
goes into a good, interesting future.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just making an allusion to our present struggle. Hell on Earth is what we've got right now.
Like, why don't you guys
Fair.
watch The Matrix Part 4? Why aren't you watching The Matrix Part 4? It's such a good movie.
Sorry.
Said almost nobody.
I have not heard anyone say that about it, that it's good.
No,
Yeah.
neither do I.
I've heard some people say that. No, I have heard someone say that they watched it once, but then watched it again and it's like, oh yeah, that's not really very good.
Lightning can't strike twice, you know.
Well, especially when you're probably just riding on the nostalgia of the earlier movie, or even the whole trilogy. They're riding on the nostalgia, not really having anything really interesting to add. That's what I've heard that too. It's hey, do we have any more settings we want to talk about in particular?
Off the top of my head, no, but there was a question earlier that Mr. Max Boyven asked that I think would be interesting to touch on. It's just above,
there?
that one there, which apparently the one you highlighted from Darth the Egg was responding to this.
Okay.
Yeah. For myself, with this question, it's really, I've had good experiences with that and bad experiences with that.
So what that is because we produce this in podcast form later on, I'm going to read it out. Mr. Max Boyven, what do you think of settings that are intrinsically linked to
Speaking of the Matrix,
like the Great Pendragon campaign or Dark Albion? So, yeah, setting and campaign intrinsically linked. What do we think about that?
Yeah. So yeah, I've had some experiences with that were good. I've had some experiences with that were not so good. I think it all kind of, in my opinion, and yes, I do agree with that too. Only the first Matrix was good.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And by the first Matrix, I mean Ghost in the Shell. The first Matrix movie.
I've never seen Ghost in the Shell, but I've heard that has merit.
It does have merit. You could even enjoy the live action one with ScarJo. You could really enjoy it if you've not seen the first 1997 Ghost in the Shell movie.
Yeah. But so for me personally, whether or not I will enjoy a campaign or a setting that does that depends entirely on what I was talking about earlier. Because technically, Deadlands does do that. And I really enjoy Deadlands. But I enjoy Deadlands because it gives me the option to break the bounds of that completely. I don't have to follow the campaign if I don't want to. And that, for me, is the number one key with any setting.
yes,
Give me the option to do it my way or your way. As long as you give me the choice, I'll be happy. If you take that choice out of my hands, I'm probably not going to enjoy your setting as much. Even if I do find things that I like about it, I'll probably just be more likely to pick those things out and turn them into something I want to use.
Right. Yeah. The Principalities of Glantry that I mentioned earlier has a campaign built in, but it's loose and is optional, and it's stated as optional, and the players, and it's suggested to do with what you want, leave out what you don't want, and the bits in there in that gazetteer aren't so linked to that campaign that your hands are tied. It's just here's a campaign idea for you in addition to the setting, not one that is. And so that's probably doesn't really qualify for that, answering that question exactly. But there is a campaign present, but it's not so tied that you even have to care about it. Entirely optional.
Yeah, I mean, the great question: can you run Star Wars and not run Star Wars?
Yeah,
that's the whole point of having a really good campaign setting. Is you could have adventures going on in the Star Wars universe, even though you know that there is a definite beginning, definite middle, definite end. There's a definite campaign arc that's going on, that's going to happen no matter what. But there's still a whole bunch of space to do things in, and you can have characters bopping around that have absolutely no interaction with the main storyline, other than the Empire's out there doing stuff. Same with Middle Earth. There's huge gaps in time that Tolkien never really talked about. 71 years between the time Bilbo comes home and Frodo leaves, and you're just like, what was everybody else doing? It's like, oh, apparently Gandalf was just smoking.
Hell, the time, like,
if you were go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, one of the things I think about with that is, like, when I saw the Peter Jackson movies, that whole thing where Gandalf leaves to do his research and then comes back is handled in a 2-minute montage.
Yeah,
that 2-minute montage covers 11 years.
Yeah, it's 11 years.
Right. And
I mean, the time he leaves and the time he comes back, that's 11 years.
Right. And Frodo is a generation ahead, at least a generation ahead of the other 3 hobbits that he travels with, at least in the book.
Yeah, he's older.
In the movie, they're all the same general age. But
yeah. Well, Pippin and Merry are kids. That's why they're so goofy.
Well, I'm not sure if any of you have seen not Wheel of Time. But
the abortion that they have on Amazon right now.
I heard something about it today, that there's an article out, bounding into comics, about
I love
an
that.
explanation. Yeah, an explanation from the showrunner about why they decided to do what they did as far as the finale goes. And of course it's representation, essentially, because Rand al'Thor is the Dragon Reborn. There's no secret there. That's what happens, and he kicks butt until he goes kind of insane for a while, and then he kind of has to hide. Anyway, a key point in one of the novels is completely changed, so that instead of him doing his thing, it's the women do the thing, or at least part of it, or most of it. And of course, there's something about canon of a story like that that is different from running a setting. So if you have a setting, most people want to put their own imprint on it. So if you want to change something for your table, then you go ahead and do that. Whatever is going to be fun at your table, you do that. But when a production company secures the IP and then doesn't use the IP except in some superficial manner, it's kind of a punch in the face to the fans of that IP. So I understand what my wife really complained a lot about Lord of the Rings, because there was no Tom Bombadil and other things, and there are some things about it that irritate me, not to the point where I don't like it, but
I'm just going to say that I didn't want to see a Tom Bombadil character, and I'm very okay with never seeing a Tom Bombadil character. I absolutely could not stand him in the books. I flipped pages ahead to where I stopped seeing Tom Bombadil, because after one page I was done. I was done after 37 pages. After 3 pages of the hobbits ran all night into a valley, down at the bottom of the gully, and then up the hill. That's 37 pages of them running from fucking whites, and I'm done. You know, I flip, 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 and they were so scared. Flip, 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 and they were so scared. Flip, 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 flip. Okay, so Indigo Dragon just hit on something that I got to say I agree with. Because I like the movies a lot more than the books. The books didn't pick up for me until Moria. And once I hit Moria, then I was like, okay, now we're into some actual good story. I was good with that. But I really despise Fellowship of the Ring. Whenever you play like a MERP or whenever you play Star Wars, you're really not playing like a Dragonlance adventure where you take the role of the characters from the novels and you go through on the rails of the track, and the DM tells you of the various events that you're in from the book. You're not doing that. In MERP, you might be playing in second or first age. In Star Wars, you might be playing in KOTOR age, or you might be playing post Return of the Jedi. You might be one of the guys that bumps into Talon Card, and he just is a bit character for one scene in one adventure 10 campaign days ago, and that'd be it. So there's always more that's going on, and your campaign doesn't necessarily have to follow the damn timeline the way it should, according to canon. It's your table, do it as you wish. Now, we're also right because we're not, saying this is bad, this is great, because your characters at the table should feel like heroes. But at the same time, when you overwrite the canon, you have millions of dollars invested in special effects house and makeup effects, and then you ruin a 10-book series on a subscription service like Amazon. The people that made the Wheel of Time show should just burn in hell. They could have written their own damn book. They could have written their own script, done something wholly original. Here's our new superhero fantasy for heroines. And
tell your own story.
Yeah, they could have done their own story, but instead they bastardized and beat the hell out of a qualified, decent story. Not a great story. I don't like the Wheel of Time. It's acceptable. It's a 3-star out of 5-star, in my opinion.
I think if he would have kept it to maybe 3 books, and told a tight story instead of the rambling, convoluted.
Isn't there like one 400-page book that's one day in the Wheel of Time series?
I wouldn't doubt it. I don't remember.
And there's the Matrix Reloading Joe.
New version.
We need to all, support Joe so we can afford a new internet provider.
Yeah, we need you off Comcast. We really do.
Yeah, it's either that. Me and GM Dave and I were discussing a possible other explanation, which might be, though I don't know. It might be my video card, which is really not very good.
No.
So, but if it's the ISP, I have a few options. I might have to move. I don't know if I'm going to be able to justify moving to a different area.
Just to get better internet.
Just for better internet provision.
I've moved like that before. That was when I moved from Illinois to Texas.
Right,
but
right.
I got to say that it's good for you to change the canon to suit the table that you have.
Yeah, because the stories that happen in the novels, if you're using the setting from the novels, the stories in the novels could be rumors. They could be legends and have no impact on what you do at your table except for interesting stories that are told by the bard at the bar.
You don't have to have any interaction with the major NPCs.
No, you don't.
Or,
right.
There is always the adventure book, where you're forced to run the characters as they're presented, and nothing you do changes the outcome of the characters. But then that's just a choose your own adventure book. So yeah, I don't think anybody wants to play Luke and not be able to do things that Luke would never do. Oh, well, you can't do that. You're Luke. But sorry, no. But no, you gotta. So that's the importance of having an IP that's open enough where you could be running around and I don't know, you're at a spaceport and you hear somebody talking about, hey, did you hear about that guy that the other day shot that guy over at that table there, they're still trying to get the blood off the walls. Yeah, I heard he drew first. And then it's just a passing conversation. And you're like, oh my God, that's the scene.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to handle playing in an IP. I know someone had asked a question. Where is it at? Someone up here asked, but essentially, how do you handle IP that doesn't really have a book or whatever? And I think the best way to do it is rumor or legend. Either it happened so far back in the past that those characters are legendary figures, because, like, say Dune. Let's say you're playing a sci-fi, and in the Dune world, and there's Dune games. You can't expect to be the Kwisatz Haderach. You can't, because that Kwisatz Haderach is a plot device, not a character type.
I wanted to be the Kwisatz Haderach. Unsubscribed.
Yeah. So you have to, one, cool your jets a little bit, because the heroes of the story are often unique beings that have plot armor and all kinds of things happen around them that may not happen around a PC. So, but I think you could tell stories in the Dune universe, even on Arrakis. You could play a bunch of Fremen that have to deal with, there's lots of different power groups. And while Paul is off doing his thing to become the God Emperor, or not become it as it ended up being, maybe you're struggling against some smuggler element that's robbing all of the spice near your siege. So maybe there's a secret band of Harkonnen that you have to go ferret out. There's probably all kinds of campaign fodder that can be happening parallel to what the events of the novels were, especially in such a, Dune has a big universe, although everybody wants to play on the planet Arrakis.
Yeah.
Boring. Sorry. Not
sorry. You didn't like Dune?
I love Dune. I think Dune is great.
Yeah.
But I find Arrakis to be where they focus so much of the story on that really, not that it's played out, but I don't want to play on Arrakis. Take me to a forest planet or to Gidi Prime or anywhere else where they didn't detail it a whole lot, and let me have that sandbox, because that sounds like fun. But being forced to kind of stay in step with the canon, and nobody here can play the fun character, it's kind of bullshit, And that's why I don't like playing in Forgotten Realms. I'm not a big fan of playing in somebody's campaign when they run Star Wars, and they're like, we're just going to do the same thing as Anakin did. Oh, God. Shoot me now.
Oh, pod racing? No, thanks.
I'm done. I'll do the stuff from the Droids cartoon, the swoop races. That was pretty fun. But the pod racing looks boring as hell. And somebody's out there like, well, the Nintendo game was really good. Oh, God.
So for me, like, when it comes to playing within like an established IP setting, something like, like you were saying, doesn't have a book or is mostly known for a movie or a show, like Star Wars, what I've always done is I will think first, what kind of campaign do I want to run in this setting? And then once I figure that out, I'll look and say, okay, one, will this setting work for this? And two, how can I make it work for this? And put in the work from there.
You make some assumptions and then create from there. You don't have to.
Like the last time I did a Star Wars game, I don't think we even touched on the Force for solidly half of the campaign. And by the time we did, honestly, I think by the time we did, everyone's schedules had changed, and then we had to end things early anyway, which, welcome to adult life. But Yeah, no, I've played Star Wars campaigns where we never touched on the Jedi. I've played Star Wars campaigns that solely focused on Jedi. I've played Star Wars campaigns that were primitivistic. I've played Star Wars campaigns that dealt with the high technology. It's literally an entire galaxy you can play in. There's so many possibilities you can do with that.
Right. And
Other
you see lots of different races.
Yeah.
Lots of
other
different
settings won't necessarily be as forgiving with that, but
Right.
yeah, the basic idea is, at least for me, what it's always worked best for me was, what type of game do I want to play? Does it work with this setting? And how does the set, if it does work, how does this setting affect this type of game?
According to Mr. Max
100%
Boyden,
agree.
it's a matter of scope. Playing in the world of an epic story sucks. Of an epic story that already exists, I believe is what you mean.
Yeah.
You will always be in the shadow of the big story. Yeah, that is true. Playing in the world of Alien or Star Trek doesn't have this problem because the scope is smaller. Yeah, Star Trek, I mean, except if you're talking about maybe the Borg having such a huge impact across the entire universe, you could play Star Trek from the point of view of the old series, and it's just episodic and it has a smaller scope. Yeah. And it works well. I agree with that. Alien, yeah, it's small scope too. It's just what's on your ship or in your colony. It's
the cinematic rules for the Alien role playing game, great. The actual campaign, nope.
Dragonlance. I never liked Dragonlance that much. I didn't think it was that exciting.
I don't know enough about it to make a judgment. I've never played in it. Never read any of the books.
Every Dragonlance campaign, somebody wanted to be Raceland, somebody wanted to be Tasselhoff. That I played too, and it was like, nope, I'm done. I want to do individual stuff. I don't really care about these guys. Show me the world.
And I didn't understand the Gully Dwarf stuff with Raceland taking a shine to that Gully Dwarf. I was like, what are you doing? I mean, he had a kind of a character path that would be like, I'm just, you're nothing to me. I didn't get that. I didn't like the Drow novels. I mean, the Dritz novels either that much. Most of the D&D books I didn't read because I got such a sour impression from earlier novels. I just stopped even being interested in them.
I read a few of the Forgotten Realms novels. I've read some of the earlier ones. I don't remember which ones. I found like one of the older trilogies, probably from around the time. I think it was from around the time of Second Ed. I found one of the older trilogies for $1.50 each at Goodwill, so I got those just for the sake of it. I read 50 pages into the first book, and like 50 pages in, this 16-year-old barmaid has somehow been dragged into some adventure with this young fucking it was like some young squire and the paladin he served under and these other adventurers. They got dragged into this whole mess with a Draco Lich, and then Elminster just bamps in there out of nowhere, takes care of everything, and leaves. So I know why you were soured on those. At that point, I just stopped reading them. But there were a couple series of Forgotten Realms books that I liked, but it's more because I thought the authors were actually pretty decent. They wrote decent stories within those settings, and they were writing about either interesting areas in the settings. Like, I'm trying to remember his name. I think it was Richard Lee Byers wrote a trilogy of books about the Red Wizards. It's like, the Fae and Red Wizards are nuts. There's like, it's just absolute insanity that you can play with there. So that was fun. And then Lisa Smedman wrote a trilogy about the Yuan Ti, crazy psychic snake people that keep humans as slaves and will regularly sacrifice them to their psycho snake god. Yeah, it's not high quality, high.
You can't say slave anymore. or sacrificed, remember,
Well,
they weren't
yeah,
slaves.
sorry, Joe. If you were over 1,000 subs, I would have gotten you demonetized.
They're indentured servants or freebooters, and they're not sacrificed. They're just going to play across the street.
Wow.
Yep. But those were decently fun. Those were decently fun little trilogies, but I mean, it's not super great.
They're
It's
fun
not
little,
like,
airport reads or whatever you call them.
exactly. Yeah.
It's a book you read to take your mind off the bus ride. It's not.
It's Pulp Fiction.
Right,
It's not
right.
it's not Shakespeare.
It's Pulp Fiction, but not as fun as the classic pulps.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if I showed this to you guys or not, but this is an ancient adventure from back in the day. That's called Ruins of Adventure. And this was written in 86 or 88, I think. It was written as a tie-in adventure to the computer role-playing game Pool of Radiance.
Pool of Radiance.
And this is where, like, if you want information that goes deeper than the computer game, it has that. They have all the maps from the computer game that made it in here. But you don't have to run it like that. It's a sandbox. It is a literal sandbox. Here's the maps of all the various places. Here's what you find here. Here's Sorcerer's Island. It gives you everything you need for that game. But this is meant to take you from first to like 8th or 9th level as a pen and paper game. So it is a acceptable way to play that game. You can have your own adventure. You don't have to really fight against Tyrannothraxus. If you want to be like, all right, we're 5th level, let's leave here and go somewhere else that doesn't suck. No, the DM really shouldn't stop you. He shouldn't. But if you want to play it as it's supposed to be, yeah, you can go along the track and do that. But it's a nice sandbox that you can open up and borrow from. There's plenty of things you can do. I'm going to kit bash that and put that into one of the many ruined cities of the Lost Lands and see how that works out. But I like campaigns like that where they give you the preferred script, but here's the sandbox. You don't have to get this there the same way we did. And you don't have to win either. That's the other thing.
Cal brings up another cool IP, the Belgariad quintuplet. What would you call it? 5-book series?
5-book series is quintology.
Yeah, and it'd be cool to play in because, and I agree with them, but you would have to take care not to want to be as powerful as the protagonists. You may not even be able to be a magic user because that it seems like they were in a kind of a familial line and quite powerful. The will and the word. It'd be interesting to see somebody pull that off without and still be. Well, just about all of the characters were magic users that they paid attention to, except for the minor ones, I think. Well, Garion's wife she was an elf, wasn't she? Didn't he marry an elf?
I thought he did.
Or some kind of she wasn't just a regular human.
She wasn't human.
Right. So she had some power of her own, which was a good thing. But his Aunt Pole and his grandfather, they were like, I mean, if I remember correctly, they were the first. Belgarath was the first person. It was like Adam, if I remember that right. At least the way he told the story made it seem like, hey, I'm Adam. I've been here since the beginning. Which I guess explains why he's kind of eccentric, but it would be I would be interested to see someone pull that one off. I didn't really care for the subsequent story because you had the Belgariad and then the Malorian and another 5-book series. I didn't think that was as good.
Well, all right.
I'm
actually gonna need to get out of here because I got a few things I got to take care of around the house tonight. But I think this is a pretty good talk, guys. And if you continue, I will keep things playing in the background as I do what I need to do.
Sure thing.
Thanks for joining us, Dave, and for tossing a coin out for Deadlands and Necessary Evil. I mean,
yeah, it was good to come back and be able to do this again. My voice has been too jacked up for the last few weeks to effectively do this for too long, so I'm glad to be able to do it again. All right, so I'll see you guys later.
Talk to you soon.
See ya. Yes, Shad. Shadzar, that's what I was saying about the
the setting gives you the good setting should give you the Legos.
Yeah.
Whether it's Deadlands or Galantre or the Lost Lands or Superhero World. Here are the Legos. Here's what's going on in the background. But here's enough freedom to tell the story you need to tell. Like Dave said, can I tell the story I want to do in this world, in this system?
Right. I'm not sure I have much more to say on the subject. What about you guys?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I just really wanted to say, the thing is that whenever you have a campaign that has a definite timeline, it's up to you and how your table will react. You know your players better than the author of the book did. So you should be the one to be the arbiter. Do you go down this path? Or do you deviate and let them forge their own destinies and not really worry about the parallel stories? Let them figure out what happens to them. I think that's a better idea than saying, no, we're going to play a Dragonlance adventure and you're all going to wander down and smack the black dragon with a staff. I don't think that's fun. I really don't.
Right. I agree. I like there to be some motivations that you can grab a hold of with a setting, even if it's just little ephemeral things. You can always build on that. So let's see. Since we are pretty much have beat this as much as we're going to tonight. Man behind the screen is who just left us. That's the name of his channel. Please go there and subscribe if you have not already. And I will let OG go next and shill himself.
As if I haven't shielded myself enough. Okay, for anybody out there who does not know who I am the OG GM. I have hosted a YouTube channel for about 6 years now, mostly focusing on the ins and outs and workings of the tabletop role-playing game and all the news that's affecting the tabletop role-playing game, and then trying to translate it into basic English and how it affects you. Occasionally I get up on a sandbox, and then that's when somebody calls me a moron or something because they really don't know what they're talking about. And then I often have long discussions with Shadzar about games. So yeah, that tells you where I am. So if you haven't had a chance to visit my site yet, come on down to the OGGM Adventures and check out what's going on in the gaming world and support your friendly local game store. And have a great new year.
All right.
Thank you,
Bruce.
I'm going to disagree with Chadzar's comment there at 9:14. He said, otherwise campaign setting has no replayability once you have done all the published adventures. And I'm going to thoroughly disagree with that. Because really, you're not shackled to just running all the events that happen within the realms of Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance, or within you don't have to go along all the things that happen within the published adventures of, say, Deadlands or Necessary Evil. You don't have to do that. And in fact, if you're an inventive individual, you can just use the rule set and the sandbox they give you to construct your own sandcastle and run the characters around that as much as you see fit. You literally have the keys to the kingdom. You get the chance to entertain them and have them challenged. There's nothing that says you can only run these published modules. You can only run this canon. No. It's yours. If you wanna run Strixhaven as a very Gothic-esque high school that is teaching kids how to be just miserable people, and they do nothing but just practice magic, and then there's a little bit of teen angst, and then you have a dance you have to go to. If you want to do that, that's fine. If you want to stay on the rails for WotC, go ahead. But if you want to actually get and diverge from their established narrative and do your own things that you think would be much more fun because you've read Harry Potter,
what Strixhaven should have been.
yeah, you can do that. You should entertain your players, and you should run the best game possible with the Lego set you have. Don't be afraid to read something new. I've got to read David Eddings one of these days. I've never done that.
It's good stuff.
But that's what I want to say. And you can find me on Bruce Lombardo 75 here on YouTube. I talk about a lot of variety of things. I'm going to be doing a wrap up for the year here. I'm going to do a review on the Ruins of Adventure here within the next week. And I've got some other stuff planned. But you can catch me on Thursday when I have Garrett and Blaine with me, and we discuss the Table Breakers part two of our exciting discussion, which I can't remember this time. But it is we've been discussing quite a bit of things here lately on Table Breakers, and we do that every Thursday at 7:30. Everybody here invited to join. We usually do pull people in that have different viewpoints than us, as we can tell by Blaine.
Right.
God bless him.
Good deal. All right. So I am Joe. I, with my friend Randy, run Biggest Geekus. It's a weekly long form podcast and a YouTube video series. There are our links. We are all over the place. Just about every social media platform, the main ones, and video storehouses, you will find our stuff. Twitter, our PayPal is up there in case you want to take some money that is in your pocket and put it in ours. We would greatly appreciate that. I think that's about it that I have from my end. We are Biggest Geekus, OGM, the OGGM, and Bruce Lombardo, and we are the gatekeepers. We like to curate our stuff. We don't just do anything, and we give our opinions, and that's all this stuff is our opinions.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. I will see you all later. Thank you, Joe, for hosting, and thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Yes, definitely. Thanks for everybody for the commentary. Even Shadzar. Good night.